All right, hello everyone. Thanks for coming out today. Welcome to our first student-led workshop by SB Creative Lab. Joyce here and I will be going over the basics of Photoshop today, which if you don't know what that is one of the major raster design programs under the Adobe Creative Suite. So yeah, again, like what Joyce said earlier, don't worry if you end up going through technical difficulties or for any of your friends who aren't able to come today, we're gonna be recording this and dropping the recording and the slides that we use today under our website and also in our Slack. So be sure to join our Slack channel as well. And again, if you're comfortable, please turn on your camera so that we can match your name with the face. So yeah, just a brief introduction of the two of us before we get started. Hello, I'm Ashley. I'm a third year and I'm a biopsych and hopefully communication double major.
And I'm Joyce. I'm a fourth year art majors and I'll be doing the demos today.
So you might be wondering what SB Creative Lab is and what we do. So we're a new student-led organization and our mission is to cultivate and build a creative space for anyone that is interested in design to really develop their skills and grow in their creative journeys. And we'll also hopefully provide accessible opportunities through different workshops and design challenges and provide you guys with resources. So hopefully they'll come in handy.
So before we go teaching you all about Photoshop, we first have to explain what is Photoshop. So as Ashley said before, Photoshop is a raster program, which means it's pixel based, opposed to vectors, which are stored in formulas. So the difference between vectors and rasters is that vectors, if you scale it up, it won't ever lose any quality because it's stored in formulas. Whereas rasters, since they're stored in pixels, if you size it up too big, then it'll end up becoming blurry, like on the picture on the right. So Photoshop is an art industry standard. So if you're looking to get into illustration or graphic design or any art professions, they'll probably require you to know this. So this is a really great tool to learn. A lot of people use Photoshop for photo editing and creating graphics, but today we'll be mainly focusing on how you can create artwork through Photoshop. The principles that we'll be teaching today in Photoshop can be applied to all raster programs. So anything that you learn today, it can also apply to Procreate or like Paint Tool Sci or other kinds of programs. We listed here a couple recommendations at different price points as to alternatives to Photoshop. So there's like programs like FireAlpaca and Medibang, which are for free. And there's also Procreate, which is a really famous one for iPad and has a lot of flexibility and different tools, just like Photoshop. I personally like using this program called Paint Tool Sci 2. And another famous one is Clip Studio Paint. They're $50, but they're a one-time charge, and they actually give you a really great experience in terms of the interface. I think it's a lot easier to use opposed to Photoshop. So this is what I actually started using when I was in middle school, and I was able to learn it by myself. And lastly, there's Photoshop. Unfortunately, it's extremely expensive. It's around $20 a month, or maybe you could get it a little cheaper with a student discount. But a really great way to still be able to get Photoshop without paying for anything is to enter in these things called Adobe Creative Jams. There are these like design-a-thons by Adobe. And if you enter in them and participate, you don't even have to win. Then you'll get like a free Creative Cloud subscription for up to a year. And that's what a lot of us did at SB Creative Lab to get our free subscription. So during this workshop today, I'll be using a tablet, but I just wanted to say that tablets aren't necessary, but they help you recreate the traditional drawing experience through pressure sensitivity. So you can do everything with a mouse if you want to, but I recommend if you're going into art or if you're going to do this long term, then a tablet is a really great investment. Alternatives to tablets are like iPads or touchscreen laptops with pressure sensitive stylus. But the downside of iPads is that they can't handle heavy duty work because they have limited RAM, so they have limited layers. So we recommend beginners to invest slightly into flat tablets, which is something like this over here, if you see. And two really well-known brands are Huion and Wacom. Huion is really, really affordable, and Wacom is just really well-known to be reliable. But Huion has like tablets as cheap as like $25, so you can definitely invest in that. And we just recommend at least 2000 pressure levels so it can like register everything accordingly. And extra like things like tilt support is of course unnecessary. You can also get a lot of free trials for the programs that we mentioned before over here. So before investing into something like Painttool Side 2 or Photoshop, you can try it out and see if you like it or not. So actually, during spring quarter of last year, I taught a digital art student colloquium here at UCSB. And this is just some of the examples of the student works that was made in raster programs like Photoshop. So this is what you can do. So before I begin, I just want to let you guys know that if I'm ever going too fast or too slow, you could just let me know and I'll be sure to like match my pace accordingly. Or if there's any questions at all, feel free to drop it into the chat and then Ashley will read them out loud. So the first thing we need to understand in Photoshop is a canvas. A canvas is similar to a blank sheet of paper. So whatever you draw within a canvas will show up, whereas everything you draw outside of a canvas won't show up. We have some recommendations of settings to make sure that your painting is high quality, which is 300 ppi, which means pixels per inch, or it's otherwise known as resolution. The canvas size should also be at least 2000 pixels. So once again, as we said before, it doesn't get too blurry. So it's really important to get a good high quality canvas before you begin. Another thing we recommend to do is to save frequently in case if your program crashes, because the bigger canvas size you work with, the more likely your program might crash. So there's even online backup programs like OneDrive and Dropbox, which can automatically save all your work so you won't ever lose your files. So now I'm gonna go into Photoshop. Oh, I see that there's something in the chat. Is everything good, Ashley?
Yeah, everything's good.
Okay, cool. So now I'm gonna go into Photoshop, and to create a new file, you can just go onto the left-hand side and click Create New. Then you can see there's like a bunch of these options, and over here is just like the name. I'm just gonna put Photoshop Demo. You can see I already put in the recommended settings, but it's 2000 pixels by 2000 pixels. And you can see that pixels can convert to other kinds of metrics like inches or centimeters. So this is really great for reference if you ever end up printing things out. I also have it at 300 resolution, so it's gonna be very high quality. And then I just click create. So as I mentioned before, this is our canvas and you can see it over here. And before we go into it, we're just kind of gonna briefly introduce the interface of Photoshop because it can be very confusing. So on the left-hand side, we have the toolbars over here. And if you left click on any of them, then you select the tools. If you right click on them, you can see that there's more options that are grouped together. And you can access them by just right clicking them, as I said. On the top, this is the menu bar, and it has more options like image adjustments or layers or filters, or even just customizing your workspace. For today, just to make sure that we have the same similar workspace setup, I go to Workspace and I click Essentials Default, and it's already set on that. Then below it, we have the tool option bar, which just gives you more options as well related to the tool you're selecting. And on the right, we have our panels. So we have different panel groups over here that you can select. But there's also collapsible panels that you can click, and you can see different options for this. On the upper right here, this is also panels like colors and swatches and like that. Cool. Is there any questions?
No, there's no questions.
Cool. Then we'll go back. So layers are something in Photoshop and raster programs, and they're similar to clear sheets of plastic that you can draw on and stack up against. So it's very similar to the picture on the right. If I was going to make a scenery, I could have a layer for every single element. For example, I can have a layer for the sky, a layer for the trees, a layer for the grass, and a layer for the ground. And this is really great because it isolates elements so they don't blend together and you can edit them individually. For example, I can move around like all the trees And I can also change the opacity and the position of it and the visibility. So we're gonna go back to Photoshop right now. And you can see Photoshop, it automatically creates a background layer when we first open a file. So I recommend if you're gonna create an illustration to select a neutral background like this gray over here. And I'm gonna select the bucket tool over here on the left, click on it, then click once on the canvas and you can see it fills it up. And the reason why I add a neutral background is so that you can see the values accurately. This is something you can also do in traditional painting that really helps, because if you put white paint on a white canvas, it's not gonna really show up well, right? So having like a mid-tone neutral color allows you to see your values better. And just to show you how we create layers, you go on the bottom right over here, you click the plus sign, and now we have a new layer. And we're gonna double click on it and we're gonna name it triangle. The reason why we name layers is to avoid confusion, because as you create more and more advanced paintings, you can end up having like easily over 50 layers. And when you have 50 layers, it's really hard to distinguish them if they're all like named layer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So this just allows you to just avoid confusion. So then I'm gonna click the brush tool over here on the left, and I'm going to select a color. I'm just gonna select this blue over here. And then I'm going to zoom in so you can see a little bit better. And then I'm just gonna draw this triangle. So then to create another layer, I just click this plus button again, and then I'm gonna name this square. Then I'm gonna select another color just so we can tell the difference, this purple, and then I'm gonna draw the square over here. So the positions of the layers really matter in raster programs. So you can see on the left, on the right over here, the square is above the triangle layer, right? So this means the square will show up over the triangle even though they're overlapping. If I click it and I hold it and drag it below, you can see now the triangle is on top of the square. And as we mentioned before, other things that you can do is that if I want to just edit the position of the square, I can click the move tool over here on the upper left corner, select it, and then I can move the square individually and it won't affect the triangle at all. Is there any questions?
No.
Cool. Then we can continue on. So another really cool function of Photoshop is clipping. So clipping just hides everything outside the contents of the clipping layer. So to demonstrate, we're going to go back to Photoshop right over here. And we're going to delete this triangle by selecting the trash button over here on the bottom right. So now it's gone. And then I'm going to create another layer. And I'm going to right click this layer, click create clipping mask. And you can see now there's the arrow pointing down on the square. And this just indicates that it's clipped to the square layer. So then I'm gonna select another color, like this cyan. I'm gonna click the brush tool again. And you can see now, even though I'm pressing down and even outside the square, it won't show up at all. But everything I paint within the square, it'll show up. So the cool thing about clipping mask is that you can turn off and on the visibility. So now if I turn it off, then you can see the original square. And I can easily edit this. So if I select the erase tool, I can also, I gotta put the opacity at 100. Then you can see that I can also erase everything that's only on the clipping mask and it won't affect the original layer. So this is really, really great if you want to shade certain objects, like if you're drawing a face and you want to add some like shadows or highlights, then you can create a clipping mask just for the highlights and shadows or for both of them only, and you won't have to worry about ruining the base layer. So another tool that's similar to clipping is Alpha Lock, which is this little like mosaic tile over there on the right. So alpha lock locks the pixels, so you can only paint in opaque pixels, and everything that's outside of it is hidden. So you might ask, like, what's the difference between clipping layer and alpha lock? So first of all, I'm going to delete this clipping layer by selecting the trash button, and then I'm going to select the alpha lock. So now you can see there's like a little lock on the right to indicate that it's locked right now. And if I select my brush again and I draw in, you can kind of see it has a similar effect, which is everything outside of it won't show up. Everything within the square shows up. But the difference between alpha lock and clipping mask is that you can see this is all within one layer. So actually, if I try to erase it, the original color won't show up, and instead, whatever your secondary color is will show up instead. So my secondary color, if you see over here, it's like this green right now. And if I erase it, the pink or purple doesn't show up, but instead the green. So these are really great, once again, for shading or anything like that, and I use them a lot when I'm illustrating. Do we have any questions?
There was a question, someone was asking about the fill tool, but I said that you'll be going over the bucket tool very soon.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Then we'll continue on. Another useful panel is the history panel. So if you click Control Z, you can undo it. And if you click Control Shift Z, then you can redo it. And on Mac, it's different controls, but we put it on the slides and you can look back to them. So if I click Control Z, you can see it undoes everything. And on the history panel, if I click on the upper right here, you can see all the actions I did. This is really great and saves you a lot of time. If you did like a lot of micro adjustments and you don't end up liking it at all, then you can just like go back all the way here, or even the new one, right? And then you can redo everything. Ashley, so you mentioned there was a question about the bucket tool. What was the question about the bucket tool specifically?
So she said that she was trying to look for the fill tool, but she couldn't find it on her end, but she did say she had the gradient tool.
Oh, so there's also a keyboard shortcut called G. Once again, if you click it, then it'll go to the bucket tool, and that's what you can access it by. But once again, I think maybe you might not be able to see it is because we have different workspaces. So once again, if you go to Windows, Workspace, Essentials Default, it should show up on the upper left. But if not, you can go all the way down here. You can see there's 3 dots, click Edit Toolbar. And from then on, I think you can, oh wait, no, this is something else. Sorry about this. I think there's a way to edit all these tools because you can also click them and move them around. I think it's this one, yeah. If you click this button over here, it should show more options and your bucket tool may appear that way. If that problem persists, then you can just shoot me a Slack message, or if we have time after this workshop, and I can like personally try to help you through like remote control Zoom or something like that. Okay, cool. Any other questions?
Nope, we're good.
All right, then we'll move back to the PowerPoint. So the lasso tool is great for preventing messy strokes outside of the area. And this gives you a lot more control than actually the brush can give. So to demonstrate, we're gonna go back here. I'm gonna delete this layer. I'm gonna create a new one. And I'm just gonna name this grass. Then I'm gonna select the brush tool over here. I'm gonna select a green. And then I'm gonna try drawing grass right now. So you can see that like, because it's a circle brush, I can't get like really nice edges for it, right? But if I use a lasso tool and I hold it down, then you can see I can get these really nice pointy edges for the grass blades. And to connect the shape, I just meet it up to where the starting point is and then lift it up. And everything that is selected by the lasso shape has these marching ants, these black and white stripes. And this shows like this is the selected area. From then on, I'll select the fill or the bucket tool. by pressing G or clicking on the left-hand side, and then clicking once. And then to deselect it, I click Control D. So you can see that there's a lot more control with this. So I really love using the lasso tool. Another thing is, as we said before, it prevents like messy strokes from outside. So while you're painting, and you're doing like a lot of marks or whatever, then you can have like accidental marks on the corner of like the screen and you don't even notice it. But this just makes sure that everything's confined into one area. So other controls of lasso tool is that if I make a shape, right, and I want to add something to it, I can hold down Shift. And while I'm holding down Shift, I can create another lasso tool shape and it'll all be like connected. Or it could be separate, but it's all one selection together. Then I can fill it by pressing G. And G gives us the bucket tool once again. Control D is to deselect it. And other controls for the lasso tool is that if you want to remove something or deselect the selection, you can hold down Alt and you can carve it away. And if you ever want to delete anything, you can just do the lasso tool and you can do delete. And you can see everything I selected was deleted over there. Another kind of lasso tool that's really great is the polygonal lasso tool, which means it only creates linear lines and sharp edges. So this is really great if you're doing like polygonal shapes or anything like that, like trapezoids or anything. And then you can see I have it there and I can fill it in. So yeah, any questions?
No questions.
Cool. Then now we'll go to brushes. I'm going to delete this and then I'm going to create another layer and name it Brush Demo. I'm going to select a less ugly color, this blue, and I'm going to select the brush. So there's a lot of things that you can do with the brushes and you can really go crazy and customize it so it can get the exact effect that you want. But today, since this is just an intro class, we're gonna only go over 3 basic settings, which is size, hardness, and opacity. So once again, I selected the brush tool here on the left, and you can see that I kind of have some settings here already, but they're the default ones, which is like 100% opacity and stuff like that. I'll be going over it. So the size of a brush really matters because it's kind of like in real life, like how big you want your brush to be and how small you want it. So right now it's at 250, so you guys can see the screen a little bit better. I can easily adjust it by just like sliding it to the left, and now it's at 58 pixels. So now you can see it's a lot smaller, right? If I want it bigger, just move it towards the right, and you can get something dramatically bigger. So yeah, this is really great. Another keyboard shortcut is if you hit left bracket, you can make it smaller, and right bracket, you can toggle it to make it bigger. So another setting is hardness. Hardness is like what it defines the edges. So right now it's at 100% hardness. But if I were gonna make it smaller, like 50%, I'm gonna make the brush a little bit smaller so we can all fit into the canvas. And you can see the edges are kind of blurred out and they're feathered, right? So they're softer edges. That's at 50%. If I do it at 15, you can see it's even more like fuzzed out and softer. So your hardness can be really helpful if you want like softer edges, and that can make it easier sometimes to blend things together. It can also be great for things that you want to draw that are like just softer in nature, kind of like clouds, So that's something that you can change. I'm gonna increase it back to 100% hardness so I can do other demos. And the last setting that we'll be going over today is opacity. So far everything has been 100% opacity, and opacity just basically means the transparency. So right now it's at 100%. That means you see that it's covering everything underneath. But if I lower it to 48%, you can see that more of the gray background shows up. And this is because it's less opaque. And if I lower it even more, it can be even 16%. So changing the opacity is really useful when you're like trying to layer on colors and make it not so super vibrant, you know? Like maybe there's like a blue color and I want to add some purple, but only a slight tint of it. Then I can just lower the opacity to like 15, 30, whatever, that's good. And then just put the purple on top. So that's all the brush settings we'll be going over today. But if you want to imitate different mediums, Photoshop already gives you like these really good starter brushes, general, dry media, wet media brushes. And if you click them, you can see that they changed what it looks like, the shape of it. And so if you click on it, it'll end up looking really different from the hard brush. You can see this one has like a more rougher edge over there. And if I increase the brush size, you can even see the shape of it, right? So a really great way to just achieve different kinds of effects to look like different kinds of medias is to just use these like preset brushes. They go a really long way, but you can also download other brushes that people have made personally, and that's what I did over here. Lastly, one thing that we'll be going over is stabilizer. So I'm going to switch back to my hard round brush, which is my default. And then I'm going to just Control Z everything. So we have a blank canvas. So right now my smoothing is at 0%. So you can kind of see that there's no delay in my brush stroke and me pressing down the pencil. But if I increase it to 100, there's more of a delay. And the reason why it creates that delay is so you can make like smoother lines. For example, move it back to 0, decrease the brush size, and I'm going to do this. And then if I do the smoothing to 100%, you can see there's more of a delay and they kind of have like smoother edges. So this is really great if you're trying to get like these really controlled lines for something that's important and you want like more of a delay so it can smooth out your brush strokes. So yep. Is there any questions about brushes before we move on?
There is actually a question. Someone asked, how long does a typical project take you in Photoshop? It seems really tedious.
It seems really tedious. Is that what it said?
Yeah.
It kind of depends what I'm doing. The kind of paintings I do or sometimes can go pretty crazy. So maybe like one painting could take like over 10 hours easily. Smaller paintings can take up to like maybe 2 or 3 hours. I will say that like in the beginning, all of this is like really hard to do, right? So it's going to take you a long time for you to learn all the keyboard shortcuts and learn how to do all of this efficiently. And that's a little frustrating, but it's part of the learning process. So once you get more used to it, like you can definitely pump out things that are like really good quality and do it really fast once you're used to it. It's kind of like painting in real life, you know, it takes time to learn how to mix all the brushes and the paint and use different kinds of like stroke widths and different types of effects and stuff like that. So it's just like that. Yeah. Is there any other questions?
No, you're good.
Cool. It also really depends on your style too. If you have a more cartoony style, of course it's going to take a lot less time because it's a lot more simpler. If you have a more realistic style, then all that rendering and detail may end up like making the painting going like much longer because you want to like add it all in. So it's different for each artist. Cool. Thanks for that question. Then we're going to move on to something called blending modes. So blending modes are kind of similar to filters. You have like the base layer, which is similar to like your photo, right? And then everything you put on top of it, that the blending layer kind of creates the effect of it based on the base layer. So it's base plus blend, and it creates some results. So I'm going to do a demonstration right now to show what I mean. So I'm going to rename this layer, and I'm going to call it blue. And then I'm going to select a more saturated blue color, and then make this circle here. Then I'm going to create another layer, and I'm just going to get this red over here, or this pink or whatever, and create another circle. Forgot to rename this layer. Remember to name your layer so you don't lose track of it. Yeah, so now I have these two shapes, right? And automatically everything is on normal. So I can click up here to select the blending layers, and it's automatically on normal, which means there's no effect to it whatsoever. Every color you pick just looks normally, right? But you can see that there are like so many different types of blending layers that you can access, but they're separated into like a couple big groups. So there's the darken group, which just makes whatever color you have just a little bit darker. There's the lighten one, which makes it lighter. Then there's contrast, which kind of does a mix of both, like lighten and dark, depending on the base layer. And these two, inversion, cancellation, and component, we're not going to go over today because that's a little advanced. But we'll be going over like common blending modes like multiply, screen, and overlay today. So I'm going to go back to Photoshop, and Photoshop has this really, really neat feature, which is like this live display, where if you hover over it, you can see what each blending mode does. So you can see the red changing a lot, and you can see the cross section of the blue, how it changes too, right? So as we said before, darken, it makes it darker, right? Lighten makes it lighter. And then this section, contrast, does a mix of both, right? So the most common ones is multiply, screen, and then there's overlay, which kind of does like this tint effect, which is really great. And as we said before, you can make a clipping mask, right? So right click it, create clipping mask, and you can see now where this red is just like only within the blue. So this is really great for like, you know, shading it. If you want more shadows, you can just like automatically click multiply, and there, you got a shadow here. And just like any other layers, you can adjust the opacity by clicking the opacity over here and sliding it down. And you can see now it's not as harsh as before. Now it's a little more subtle. Is there any questions with blending modes?
Yes, someone asked, in what situation would you need to use these?
So that's really great because I think I'll show you soon, because now we're going to combine everything we reviewed together and create a little painting together. So I can show you there, but blending modes, I usually use them for overlaying colors. So like if I want it to look slightly purple, right, I can just do overlay, right? Because then the blue and pink kind of mixes this way. So I use overlay a lot, but also if I want like certain like highlights, like these colors are not colors I would ordinarily pick on a color wheel. So these end up giving like these really cool, like different kinds of colors that I like. Like there's this really strong pink, you know? So I kind of do them a mix of like while I go, but also at the end, like I said before, it can act as a filter. So you can put one, like put a blend, a whole like fill color on your entire painting. And then you can like lower the opacity of it, and it'll make everything look a lot more cohesive, just like a filter does. Is there any other questions?
No, but before you move on, did you want to talk about the difference between lighten and screen and darken and multiply?
Yeah. So as I said before, like the difference, do you mean like just like specifically between like darken and multiply?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So all these different layers, they kind of do different effects based on like this mathematical formula. I'm not going to go into the mathematical formula, not necessary for like art majors. But you can search it up if you want to on the Photoshop website, and it'll tell you exactly what they're like multiplying the base ratio with like the other color and whatever like that. So if you hover over them, you can see that multiply just makes it a lot more deeper and richer, whereas darken can look a little more paler and lighter. Same things like with lighten and screen. You can see that lighten has a lot more of the original color, which is like more of that red in there, and screen just like makes it, the luminosity or the luminance or brightness is just a lot more than lighten. So it's not necessary to know, like, once again, all the differences between like what's color dodge and screen and lighten. Like it doesn't matter, because in the end you just want like a a certain effect, I just want to make it darker, then I'll just hover over it and be like, okay, this effect I like, and then I can click it and I can adjust it from then on, like adjust the opacity. Cool. Any more questions?
Nope, you're good.
Cool. Then now we'll go into the fun part, and I'm going to delete these layers. And now I'm going to create an illustration to show you how we can use all these tools all together to make a very basic scenery. So once again, I already have my background color to a neutral color so we can just see all the colors accurately. Then I'm going to click lasso tool. And as I said before, I'm going to use this and create some grass. So right now, as I do this demo, if you have any questions, feel free to put it into the chat because you'll just be watching me paint and I can answer any questions as we go. So I'm just going to click Alt to just make them a little bit sharper at places and Shift to add like different directions of the grass perhaps. And then I'm going to click G for the bucket tool, select grass color I like, maybe one that isn't so gross, like that neon green. Then I'm just going to lay it down here. And I realized I did something wrong. So something that I noticed is that I put in the background layer, and that's not what we want to do. So I'm going to click Control Z, and then I'm just going to undo this so the selection is still there. I'm going to create another layer, name it to grass, and then I'm going to fill it in. So it's really important to know what layer you're drawing in, or else you can end up drawing on different layers that you don't mean to. For example, if you have a layer just for your the skin, like like arms or whatever, and then you have a layer for a hair, and you draw the hair on the arm layer, then if you try to move the arm, then it'll move the hair strand too. So it's important to see what you're selected, and you can see whatever you're selected is in a lighter color compared to other layers. So now I have this grass layer. Then I'm going to create another layer, and it's going to be the sky. So I'm just going to select this blue and continue with it. Use the bucket tool, fill it in. And because it's above the grass layer, you can see it's covering it. So I'm just going to click and hold it and put it below. And I'm going to make this a little bit lighter so everything looks a little bit better. And once again, this is just like a Q&A session or whatever right now. So if you have any comments, questions, anything like that, feel free to just drop it in and we'll answer it.
Yes, there's actually a question. When you were first self-learning Photoshop, what resources did you refer to?
I watched so many YouTube videos. They really help, especially since Photoshop, you can tell like this is only an intro classes, but there's a bunch of tools that I didn't even hit yet, right? And like all these different options. So watching a beginner Photoshop tutorial really helped me. But also what also helps is that I used to watch a lot of speed paints. So artists will release like these time-lapse video. Maybe you guys seen it on their social media or whatever, or their like Patreon page, and they'll do time lapses. And time lapses are honestly really great to just learn, because then we can see the mentality and like their logic behind the drawing and see how they build a painting, right? So that really helps me see like, oh, this is what I should do first, or oh, that's like a really neat trick that I didn't know before. And that's how I learned about the lasso tool and using it for like these kind of uses. So that's what I recommend. Like, watching YouTube videos, tutorials, and then seeing like time-lapse videos of it.
There's another question. Is there any way to create an outline? For example, if you wanted to outline the grass in black.
So there's like there is like a tool for it if you want to outline it. I'm pretty sure there's a way to do it automatically. If you go to layer or effects, maybe image, something like that. Because I actually haven't done that in a really long time. Maybe filter. But if you search it up online, I am pretty sure you will find a way. I'm sorry, I can't answer that. But another way to just like create an outline is you can, so I can select the grass by doing like Control A, so it selects everything on this layer. I can do Control C, and then I can paste it. And then if you want a darker outline, for example, I'm going to use the eyedropper tool, so it's like the color and then something darker. And I'm going to use the bucket tool and then make it a little bit darker. And I'm going to put it below the grass. And you can see, I can kind of line it up, kind of. So it kind of looks more like a drop shadow right now. So that's one way of doing an outline, kind of more of a jank version, I guess. But how I used to do it is that I used to create another layer. And I would just literally just re-outline everything. So I would just grab my brush and then just, like redraw the grass blades, I guess. But yeah, there's probably a more efficient way considering how like robust Photoshop is. Yes, any other questions? Sorry, I couldn't fully answer that, but I'm sure the internet can help you.
Yeah, there are no more questions.
Okay, cool. Those questions were all really great, by the way. So now I'm gonna select the polygonal tool and I'm gonna select a purple that I like because I'm just gonna do some mountains now. And I'm just gonna press down on these points to create some mountains. And then once again, go back to the starting point, and now it's all selected. Then I'm gonna click G for bucket tool, fill it in, Control D to deselect, put it below the grass. So now we have our mountains, yay! And then now I'm gonna create a clipping mask so I can shade it. So I made a new layer, then right click and create clipping mask. And then I'm just gonna select a lighter version of it maybe. And then I'm gonna select the brush tool and pick a better tool than this hard round brush. So you can see there's like a lot of different effects. And I'm just gonna select this dry texture one. I'm gonna increase the size of the brush by right bracket tool. I'm just gonna put it on top. Then I'm going to select the blending tools and I can do lighten, or screen. So I can do screen and then I can lower the opacity of it, or I can do lighten. I think lighten actually looks a little bit cooler right now. So I'm just gonna continue shading these mountains.
There's a question. Could you explain the mode function at the top of the screen?
This one is the same as the one I was accessing before. So this is the blending modes. So if you can, so I can just click like color burn and that will just apply it to that brush stroke only. So whereas before when I clicked it on the right over here, you see how it changes the entire layer? So all the brush strokes. If I click it up here to color burn, which is another like effect, then you can see it applies it to just this brush stroke only. So I can create these like really crazy effects, but I don't generally do that. I just generally like affect the entire layer because it's easier for me that way. That was a good question. Any other questions?
Nope, very good.
Cool. So yep, I'm just gonna create some highlights here. Then I'm gonna rename this to highlights. Create another layer, create a clipping again. So you can have multiple clipping masks, as I said before. And then I'm gonna name this shadows. I kind of want it a little bit bluer. And I'm gonna select this blue. And then I'm just gonna put multiply. And I'm gonna change to a different shape now. or different brush. And I made it too big, so I'm gonna make it smaller. Still kind of too big. Yeah, that's a little bit better. So I don't want it that dark. So I can lower the opacity of it as well. Or I can just select like a lighter color. So this is still too dark for me. So I'm just gonna lighten it up. And if you think there's anything good or anything you want me to add to this painting, yeah, feel free to chat it. You want to see some birds? I can draw some birds for you. So yeah, so now there's some shadows here, and I'm gonna do the same thing for the grass over here. Create another clipping mask. And then I'm gonna select this light yellow color. Select another kind of brush. This one that looks good. So I'm just gonna select this. And I'm just gonna add some yellow to it.
Yes. Okay. There are a couple of suggestions for things you can add to your drawing, and there's a question. Someone wanted to know if you could explain again how you get the dark purple without getting it on the grass. Is it just because of the layers?
Yes, it's because of the layers. So you can see over here, they have like the 2 arrow marks, right? So this purple, like all these shadows, it doesn't actually interact with the grass because this is connected to the mountain layers. But to make it more obvious, I can even group it by clicking this. And I'm just gonna rename this to mountains. So you can see how the grass layer is over here. If I turn it off, you can see that the mountain layers only has that dark purple into it. So yeah, they are connected through different layers. You got that right.
And 2 suggestions. Can you do a little bunny in the grass and wispy clouds?
Yeah, cool. Let's do some clouds first, and then we'll do some bunnies. So I'm gonna name this highlights. And also, you don't have to like make your name so long. It's actually easier if you make it shorter. So instead of writing out shadows, I just put shad most of the time. I'm gonna go to like this blue over here, and then I'm gonna select multiply. I actually don't like how that looks. So I'm gonna add a different kind of blue. Yeah, that's a little bit better. I'm just gonna lower the opacity. Okay, let's add some clouds. So I'm just gonna select a brush that's a little softer so it can mimic the clouds effect. So this one looks pretty good. I'm gonna select white. And I actually want this to be behind my mountains. I don't want it to be over my mountains, so I'm gonna hold it down and put it below mountains. And now I'm just gonna create some fuzzy clouds. Any other questions or comments or suggestions?
Not anything yet.
Okay, cool. So now we got these clouds here. Yep, and then we can add some shading. We don't even have to make another layer if we don't want to. We can just kind of blend it all together. Cool, and I don't want it that bright, so I'm just gonna lower the opacity once again. And then we can draw a bunny. So let's see. What color bunny should we do? Do you guys have any suggestions? No suggestions. Do you have a suggestion? Huh?
Alan said white.
White? A white bunny?
Okay. White and blue.
A white and blue bunny? Okay, got you. All right, so I'm just gonna select this round brush. Oh, that brown brush is kind of wonky, so I'm going to select a different brush. Go back to the general ones. And we can just add like little eyes and zoom in a little bit more so it's a little bit easier to draw. Oh, this bunny's kind of chonky. Sorry about that. Okay, now we have like a little bunny. And we'll add his little ears and outline everything. It looks like it has a collar. Okay, cool. Now we have a bunny. Great. So we got a couple minutes left, and I always like to finish off my sceneries with some sun. Go back to my roots, you know? So I always drew my sun on the upper left corner of all of my kid drawings. So here's my sun. Then we're gonna draw some rays. And then we gotta add sunglasses because it's hot and it's cool, you know? Okay, cool. So now you have this drawing. And now in order to release it to online, we have to export it into a different file format. All files created in Photoshop are automatically created as a PSD file. So that means that other people with Photoshop, if you give them their file, they can open up and see all your layers, all these options, like all these clipping masks and stuff like that. But most people don't have Photoshop, right? So how are they going to access it? Well, most images live on the internet as JPEG and PNGs. So the difference between JPEG and PNG is that PNG allows for transparent backgrounds. You can see that there's this orange background over here, and you can still see the strokes and it won't show the white background, right? But a JPEG, it doesn't allow for transparent backgrounds. Instead, it just exports it as a white background. PNGs are typically recommended for any kinds of graphics because it's better stored that way, so it has higher quality. Whereas JPEG are lower quality than PNGs, but that also means that it's smaller file sizes. So to just save our little drawing over here, we're gonna go on File, and we're gonna click on Export, Export As, and this pop-up menu comes up, and you can see everything. You don't need to change anything, and you can just click Export. And you can rename it to whatever you want. Click Yes. And there we go. Now it's all done. So now we invite you guys to create your own scenery using different layers and different blending modes. Be sure to tag us at SB Creative Lab on Instagram if you do, so we can just feature and share your progress. And you can submit your artwork through this Google form by just clicking on it. And once again, we only want JPEG or PNG submissions only, so be sure to export it. So if you click on this, what will happen is that we'll go to this Google form over here, and you can just click Add File and add your file. So these are just some of the examples, more examples of the artwork done in my digital arts colloquium I taught. You can actually see that for this assignment, we said to only use the lasso tool. So yeah, this is all just created with one tool on Photoshop. So you can take and use just that one tool and go really far with it.
Okay, so our upcoming event is next Tuesday, October 13th at 6:30. It's going to be our first workshop with an industry professional, Aaliyah Chen, who is currently a visual development artist at Netflix Animation. So if you're interested in that, be sure to sign up for that. I'll drop the link below in the chat. Yeah, and then our next student-led workshop will be on Illustrator Basics, which is also one of the programs under Adobe Creative Cloud. So if you've been meaning to learn about Illustrator but never got the chance to, be sure to come out November 5th at 6:30 as well. And check social media for more details and sign up link as we get closer to the actual date. Yeah, so you can get connected with us at any of these platforms below. I know there's a lot, but they are all linked if you click on the icon. And so, yeah, so feel free to check out our website at sbcreativlab.com, as well as make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And also be sure to join Slack channel. I'll send the invite link later, but it's our main mode of communication. Or you can also sign up for our emails by clicking on the link or scan the QR code if you want to. Yeah, so anyways, thank you guys so much for coming out to our first workshop today. I hope that you guys were able to take away something. And if you have any questions or feedback or suggestions, please let us know through this Google form or contact any of us on Slack.
Yeah, so this is what the feedback form looks like. And yeah, as Ashley said before, thank you guys for all coming. If you guys have any questions, if you run into any troubles, feel free to message me on Slack, or you can put it in any of the channels and we'll answer you. Yeah, we really appreciate it. I'm really glad that it helped you, Jessica.
Thank you guys.